Hello and welcome to what is this, week 5 in a row? Woo! Okay, let's get started. Chapter 5 A Witness. Derek sat before the CRT screen on the apartment table and watched the entertainment that Aryan was providing him, in the form, at this moment, of sentences and their grammatic diagrams. Before that it had been a compendium of various failed angle trisection theorems, and before that an incredibly long list of the powers of 10 and the various words that had been invented to describe the astronomical numbers those powers represented. It was an insomniac's nightmare. It was a dark grey morning, the air heavy with the chill of the night, and the rain had pounded Robot City for many hours. The sky was slate as the remnants of the night's devastation drifted slowly away on the wings of the morning. He felt like a caged animal, his nerves jangling madly with the notion that he couldn't leave the apartment if he wanted to. They had been dropped off in the early evening after the meeting at the compass tower, and hadn't seen a supervisor robot since. The CRT had no keyboard and only received whatever data they chose to show him from moment to moment. At this particular time they apparently felt the need to amuse him, but the time filler of the view screen only increased his frustration. He hadn't slept well. The apartment had only one bed and Catherine was using it. Derek slept on the couch. It had been too short for him and didn't make sleeping any easier. But that wasn't the real reason he'd been awake. It was the rain. He couldn't get out of his head the fact that the reservoir had been nearly filled when he'd flung into it the night before. How, then, could it possibly hold the immense amounts of water that continued to pour into it with each successive rainfall? He'd worried over that point. The more rain, the greater the worry. The fact that the supervisors hadn't contacted him since before the storm seemed ominous. All of their efforts seemed revolved around the weather problems. How did the weather tie in with the rapid growth rate of the city? Were the two linked? "You're up early," came Catherine's voice from behind him. He turned to see her, face soft from sleep, framed by the diffused light. She looked good, a night's sleep bringing out her natural beauty. She was wrapped in the pale green cover from her bed. He wondered idly what she was wearing beneath it, then turned unconsciously to his awakening, after the explosion in Uranus's ship, in the medical wing of the Rockcliffe station, to find her naked on the bed besides. Embarrassed, he pushed the thought aside, but its residue left another thought from that time, something he had completely forgotten about. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. Her face darkened and he watched her tighten up. "What is it?" she asked. "When we were at Rockcliffe, Dr. Galen mentioned you had a chronic condition," he said. "Later, when he began to talk about it, you shut him up." She walked up to look at the screens, refusing to meet his gaze. "You're mistaken," she said. "I'm fine. The picture of health." She turned slightly from him, and there seemed to be a small catch in her voice. When she turned back her face was set firm, quite unlike the vulnerable morning creature he'd seen a moment ago. "What's happening on the screen?" she said. He looked. A pleasant, always changing pattern of computer-generated images was loosing through the CRT, accompanied by a random melody bleeped out by the machine's tiny speaker. "You make it very hard for me to believe you," he said, ignoring the screen. "Why, when we need total honesty and trust between us, do I feel that you're holding back vital information from me?" "You're just paranoid," she said, and he could tell he was going to get nothing from her. "And if you don't change the subject quickly, I'm going to find myself getting angry, and that's no way to start the day." He reluctantly agreed. "I'm worried about the rains," he said. "They were worse last night than the night before." She sat at the table with him. "Well, if this place is getting ready to have major problems, I hope we're out of here before they happen. We've got to get something going with the murder investigation." "Do you know what makes rain?" he asked, ignoring the issue of the murder. "What has that got to do with our investigation?" she asked, on edge. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just wondering about these rains. "Don't say it," she replied, holding up a hand. "You're worried about your robot friends. Well, let me tell you something. Your friends are in the process of keeping us locked up for the rest of our lives." "Not locked up, surely," he interrupted. "This is serious," she said, angry now. We have a very good chance of being kept prisoner here for life. You know, once they make a decision like that, I see no reason that they would ever change it. Don't you see the gravity of the situation?" He looked at her calmly, placing a hand over hers on the table. She drew it away, and he felt his own anger rise, then rapidly subside. "I understand the problem," he explained, "but I fear the problem of the city is more pressing, more imminent." "But it's not our problem. The murder is. Indulge me," he said. "Let's talk about the weather for just a minute." She sighed, shaking her head. "Let's see what I remember," she said. "Molecules respond to heat, separating, moving more quickly. Water molecules are no exception. On a hot day they rise into the atmosphere and cling to dust particles in the air. When they rise into the cooler atmosphere they turn into clouds. When the clouds get too heavy, too full of water, they return to the ground in the form of rain." "Okay," he said. "And wind is simply the interplay of heat and cold in the atmosphere." She shrugged. "The cold, heavier air pushes down and forces the warm air to move. Wind." "I think I'm beginning to see a connection," he said, excited. "Look, Robot City is building at a furious pace, sending a great deal of dust into the atmosphere." He thought about the reservoir. "Meanwhile they are somehow liberating a great deal of water from the mining processes that are needed to build the city. Along with the mining processes come a tremendous amount of kinetic energy, heat, which they are venting into the atmosphere near the water, forcing the heated molecules to rise as water vapor and cling to the dust particles that are thick in the atmosphere right now. At night the temperature cools down a great deal." "That could be an uncompensated ozone layer," she said. He pointed to her. "Ozone, that's what seals our atmosphere. As goes the ozone layer, so goes our temperature inversions. So it cools at night, the rains are forming, the cool air brings on the big winds, and the rain falls." "So," Katherine said, "if they slowed down the building pace, it could slow down the weather." "It seems logical to me," he replied. "So why don't they do it? That's the mystery, isn't it?" The door slid open and Wooler, the golden robot, moved into the room, flanked on either side by smaller robots. "Good morning," Wheeler said. "I trust your sleep time was beneficial." "You're going to have to learn to knock before you come barging in here," Katherine said. "Now go out and do it again." Derek watched the robot dutifully march outside the door and slide it closed. He knew that Katherine was simply venting frustration. On spacer worlds, robots were considered simply part of the furniture, and their presence was not thought about in terms of privacy. There was a gentle tapping on the door. The nature of the material muffled the sound somewhat. "Come in," Katherine said with satisfaction, and the door slid open, the robots re-entering. "Is this the preferred method of treatment in the future?" Wheeler asked. "It is," she replied. "Very well," the robot said, then noticed Derek's sleeping covers on the sofa. "Should these be returned to the bedroom?" "You only provided us with one bed," Derek replied. "I slept out here." Wheeler moved further into the room, coming up near the table. "Did we err? Was the sleeping space too small? Katherine and I would simply like separate places to sleep." "Privacy?" Wheeler asked, as with the knocking on the door. "Yes," Katherine said, and he could tell she was unwilling to delve into the social aspects of sleeping arrangements, so he left it alone too. "Online time is a matter of priorities right now," the robot said, "but we will see if we can arrange something for you that is more private." "Thanks," Derek said, "and if it takes another day to arrange it, that's all right with me. It's Katherine's turn to sleep on the couch tonight." "What?" she said loudly. Derek grinned broadly at her. She wasn't amused. He quickly changed the subject. "What brings you here this morning, Wheeler?" he asked. "Have you reached a decision about her request of yesterday?" "Yes," the robot replied, "and it is with our sincerest wish that the decision be one that all of us can accept. First, in addressing the issue of your investigation and freedom of movement, we conferred at as great a length of time would permit under the present circumstances, and decided that, despite your flaws, you are human, and that fact in and of itself demands that we give you the benefit of the doubt in this situation. Many of our number were concerned about your veracity, or lack of it, but I reminded them that a great human philosopher once said, 'Isn't it better to have men being ungrateful than to miss the chance to do something good?' And so my fellows voted to do good in this regard." "Excellent," Derek said. "But," Katherine helped. "Indeed," Wheeler returned, "it is my place to philosophize in any given situation, and I need remind you now that one must always be prepared to take bad along with good." "Just get on with it," Katherine said. Wheeler nodded. On the matter of your safety and your unpredictability, it was decided that each of you would have a robot companion to help you in your investigations. You mean to guard us, Catherine said. Merely a matter of semantics, Wheeler countered, and Derek could tell that the robot had been geared for diplomacy. Actually, in this case, I believe you may find these robots more useful as assistants than as protection. In fact, one of them was present during the death of David and the subsequent confusion. Catherine perked up. Really? Which one? The robot to Wooler's left came forward. Its body was tubular, its dome a series of bristling sensors and photocells. Without arms it seemed useless in almost any sense. What are you called? Catherine asked the machine. The machine's tones were clipped and precise. I am Event Recorder B-23, Model 13, Alpha 4. I'll call you Eve if that's all right, Catherine said, standing and wrapping her blanket a little tighter around herself. She looked at Derek. I want this one. Fine, Derek said, then to the other, come here. The robot moved up close to him. You'll answer to Rec. Rec, the robot repeated. We call these robots witnesses, Wheeler said. Their only function is to witness events precisely for later reporting. That's why they have no arms, Derek said. Correct, Wheeler replied. They are unequipped to do anything but witness. Once involvement begins on any level, the witness function falters in any creature. These robots only witness and report. They will know the how of almost everything, but never the why. They will answer all of your questions to the best of their ability, but again, they are unable to make any second-level connections by putting events together to form reasons. I'm going to get dressed, Catherine said, the happiest Derek had seen her in days. She hurried out of the room, disappeared down the hall to the bedroom. Where will we be denied access? Derek asked. Or is the entire planet open to us? Alas, no, Wheeler said. You'll be denied access to certain parts of the city and certain operations. Your witness, however, will tell you when you've stepped into dangerous water, as it were. What are the chances of me getting around a terminal? Derek asked, and talking to the Central Core. The Central Core has sealed itself off because of our present state of emergency, Wheeler said. It will not accept input from any sources save the supervisors, and we are unable to help you in this regard. How did the day-to-day operations survive? He asked. Essential information can be gathered through any terminal, the robot answered, but input is limited. You don't mind if I try? That is between you and the Central Core. We all have our jobs to do. All that we insist upon is that you honor your commitment to come back here when the rains approach. We must put your safety above all else. Having failed in this regard with your predecessor, we perhaps err on the side of cautions, but all privileges will be denied should this directive be overlooked or ignored. I understand, Derek replied, and I will respect your wishes. Your words, unfortunately, mean very little right now, the robot said, turning to the door, his head swiveling back to Derek. By your deeds we will judge you in the future. As an Earth philosopher once said, the quality of a life is determined by its activities. Now I must go. With that, Wheeler moved quickly through the opening and departed hurriedly down the elevator. The activity bothered Derek. It said to him that things were not going well in Robot City. He had intended to ask Wheeler about the effects of last night's rain, but then decided a first-hand look might be better, and determined that Rec would take him where he wanted to go. There, Catherine said, coming down the hall to bustle around the room. She wore a blue one-piece that the dinner server robot had brought with it the night before. Finally, we can start moving in a positive direction. Where do you want to start? I thought I'd go down to the reservoir, he replied, and see how much rain fell last night. She stopped walking and stared unbelievingly at him. Don't you realize that every moment is precious right now? We need to find that body and see what happened. It could be decomposing or something at this very minute. I've got to see if there was any damage, he said. I'll try and join you later. Never mind, she said angrily and walked quickly toward the door. Satisfy your stupid urges. I don't want you with me. You'll just get in the way anyhow. Come on, Eve. We've got a corpus delicti to find. She walked out the door without a backward glance and was gone. Derek frowned after her. He couldn't help the way his feelings ran on this. He felt that so much of his own life, his own reasons for being, hinged upon the future of Robot City, and that its troubles seemed to be his own. I want to go to the reservoir, he told Rick. Can you take me there? Yes, friend Derek, Robot answered, and they left together. When they arrived at street level, Derek was disappointed to find that the supervisors hadn't left any transportation for him to use. A great deal of time would be wasted walking from place to place. Perhaps he could talk to Euler about it later, although he feared that the reasons had much to do with keeping him from going very far from home. "Do you want to go the most direct route?" the witness asked him. "Yes, of course," Derek said as they set out walking. "Let me ask you a question. Is the rain a result of the work being done on the city?" "For the most part," Rick answered through a speaker located on Derek's side of his dome. "It is also the rainy season here. If they slowed down the building, would it slow down the rain?" "I do not know." Derek was going about this wrong, asking the wrong questions of a witness. "How does the city make rain?" he asked. The robot began talking, recalling information in an encyclopedic fashion. "Olivine is mined below ground in crushed vacuum, releasing carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, from which water vapor, carbon dioxide, and methane gas and other traces of other chemicals are liberated. Iron ore is also being mined for building materials, along with petroleum products for plastics." "Plastics?" Derek asked. "Plastics are used as alloys in making the material from which the city is constructed. Do you wish me to go on with my previous line of witnessing?" "Let me tell you," Derek said, "and if you tell me I'm right. Water vapor, along with the heat energy from the mining process, is pumped into the air. Heat is also being pumped into the reservoir. The CO2 is bled into the forest to help growth. The reason that the weather is so rainy now is that the city is growing too fast, giving off too much heat, dust, and water. I do not know why the weather is so rainy right now," Rex said. "I do not even understand what 'so rainy' means. The other statements you made are juxtapositional with statements I heard Supervisor Avernus make, which I assume to be correct." "Fine," Derek said. "Is there a problem with the ozone layer?" "Problem?" the robot asked. Derek rephrased. "Is any work being done on the ozone layer?" "I do not know," Rex said, "although I heard Supervisor Avernus say on one occasion that the ozone layer needs to be increased photochemically to 10 parts per million." "Good," Derek said. "Very good. Are you pleased? You are pleased with my witnessing?" Rex asked. "Yes," Derek replied. "Will the supervisors be asking you to witness later what we've discussed?" "That is my function, friend Derek." They walked for nearly an hour by Derek's watch, the city still subtly changing around them. It sometimes took a while to get information out of the witness, but if questions were phrased properly, Derek found Rick an endless source of information, and wondered how Catherine was faring with her witness. Derek knew they were nearing the reservoir long before they arrived there. A long stream of robots were moving towards and away from the site, followed by large vehicles bearing slabs of city-building material. They walked into an area sonorous with activity, echoes raising the pitch enough that Derek covered his ears against the din. Within the confines of the reservoir area, his worst fears were realized. The water had reached the top of the pool and was splashing over slightly in various areas. For their part, the robots were doing their best to stop it. Large machines, obviously converted from mining work, had been modified to lift huge slabs of the building material to the top of the pool, where utility robots with laser torches were welding the higher sections together, trying for more room, bathing the area in various sections in showers of yellow sparks. It was a massive job, the reservoir covering many acres as the robots worked frantically to finish before the next rain. And to Derek's mind, this could be no more than a stopgap measure, for unless the rain was halted, it would overflow even the extra section in a day or two. "What happens if the water overflows?" he asked Rick. "I am unable to speculate on such matters, friend Derek," the robot said. "It is not overflowing. When it does, I will witness." "Right," Derek said, and moved forward, closing on the workers. "Do not get too close," Rick called. "It is dangerous for you." Derek ignored him and moved closer, recognizing Euler, who was helping with the movement of a slab. He was directing a large heavy-based machine with a telescoping arm that held a 6 by 6 meter slab in magnetic grips. He was holding his pinches at the approximate distance the arm had yet to travel, so that it would be flush with the edge of the pool and the slab next to it. Utility robots physically guided the slabs to the ground and held them so the workers could set to work immediately. Euler! Derek called, the robot jerking to the sound of its name. It's too dangerous for you here, Euler called back, waving him away. We have no safety controls over this area. I'll only say a centad, Derek said, moving up close to him. He could look past the end of the last slab and see the dark waters churning the top of the pool. In the distance, all around the reservoir, he could see the same operation being repeated by other crews. "What are you doing here?" Euler asked him. "I had to see for myself," Derek answered. "I knew the water levels were rising. Why didn't you stop the building pace and let these waters recede?" "I can't tell you why," Euler said. "But what happens when this overflows?" "We lose the treatment plant," Euler said, holding his pincers up to signify to the arm to stop moving the slab. Then he motioned to the ground, the arm bringing the slab down very slowly. "We lose much of our mining operations. We lose a great many miners. We will have failed. Then stop the building." "We can't!" Just then a utility robot working the slab was bumped slightly by the moving metal and lost its footing on the wet floor. Soundlessly, without drama, it slipped from the edge of the pool and fell into the dark waters, disappearing immediately. Everything stopped. Euler pushed past Derek to hurry to the water's edge, where he stood, head down, watching. The rest of the crew did the same, lining up quietly beside the water. Derek moved to join Euler. "I'm sorry," he said. Euler slowly turned his head, looked at the boy, not saying anything for a very long time. "I should have paid more attention," he said. "How deep is the water?" Derek asked. "Very deep," Euler replied. "I was talking with you and didn't give the job my complete attention." "Can he be saved?" "Had there been more time," Euler said, "the job would have been studied for safety and feasibility and this wouldn't have happened. Had I known better I wouldn't have allowed you to come so close. A robot is lost and the supervisor is to blame." "There's nothing you could have done," Derek said. "A robot is dead today," Euler told him. "I will not answer any more of your questions right now." And thus ends chapter 5. Okay, well, hope you enjoy. Bye.